Welcome back for some more holiday fun. Last week we took a look at a first-person perspective noir film where you helped Philip Marlowe solve the mystery. And we watched as Humphrey Bogart and friends made Christmas nice for a poor shopkeeper and his family in the quirky, offbeat We're No Angels. And lastly we moved to Canada for a gritty but also kind of fun crime thriller with The Silent Partner. Let's look at 3 more Christmas treats today, shall we? Kicking off this week's look at some Christmas crime capers, let's start with something that's actually pretty simple and straightforward. Kind of a forgotten B-movie from 1949. Here's Cover Up. Now, if you come into Cover Up expecting a film noir that's very moody and artistic, something like The Maltese Falcon, you're going to be pretty disappointed. Or if you come in expecting some kind of quirky, offbeat, serio-comic mystery job, something like The Big Sleep, you're also going to be pretty disappointed because Cover Up feels a lot like almost a TV movie. It kind of gave me almost like a Matlock or that old In the Heat of the Night TV show. It has much more of that sort of vibe to it. It's very workmanlike. It's kind of plain. I guess you'd almost say it's more of just a crime drama than it is a film noir per se. A very simple story. The town curmudgeon is found dead. The local police and other authority figures write it off as suicide, but the insurance company dispatches an investigator to see if they have to pay out anything and who to, etc. And the investigator can tell from the very moment he examines the crime scene that it was foul play, that there's no way it could have been a suicide. But since everybody in town hated this man, it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly who was responsible and why, that kind of thing. We are introduced to a very believable pool of suspects, each of whom with their own motivation, etc., and some of whom are so chummy it seems like it could have been multiple people perpetrating this murder. So Dennis O'Keefe is quite good in this, in the lead role, kind of as the quirky insurance investigator, very serious about his job, but also a swell guy, a good egg, and everybody likes him, or at least should like him anyway. And we have people like William Bendix as the enigmatic town sheriff, that kind of thing, who is willing to help, but not go out of his way to do so. Art Baker, who popped up in various film noirs like Ride the Pink Horse, things like that, is seen briefly here as the father of his love interest, who it doesn't seem like is involved, but as the story goes on becomes more and more involved in this case, that sort of thing. So a very interesting little movie in the sense that it feels very believable and very grounded. My big issue though is of course the town curmudgeon, no one's sad that he's dead, but we're never really told why everybody hates him so much. We don't even get one of those weird, vague 1940s statements like, after what you did to that girl, or something like that, that is made, okay, we know they're bad, but it's never really explained in any detail. We don't even really get that. We just know everyone hated this guy, and then one day he's dead, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit weak in that regard, but the kind of manhunt-ish aspect of the story, I think works pretty well. The ending is very satisfying. You can add the mysterious Dr. Charles Giroux to the list of film noir characters we never see, but they do indeed play an important role. We've seen quite a few of those before, like Floyd Thursby and Sean Regan, and from last week's video, Crystal Kingsby, that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, Cover Up, it's a very simple, fun little movie. It is very festive, that kind of thing. There's a big scene where the town unveils its Christmas tree, things like that, so it does fit in with the Christmas motif. But, you know, if you're looking for something really serious and something that's really going to make you think or dazzle you with its visual brilliance, you're really not looking in the wrong place. This is just kind of a cheapo B-mystery film, fun enough to watch, serviceable enough, not going to be a holiday classic anytime soon. I should add that this bizarre DVD I bought from Amazon by Jenny On Entertainment is indeed a thin pack case. You don't often see DVDs sold individually in thin packs, so that's kind of strange. The disc itself, the movie's in kind of bad shape, I don't know. And it should be added that the cover image, or I should say the front and back cover images, are not actually from this movie. You can clearly see Mike Mazurki there on the front cover, and he's not in this movie at all. So I have no idea what film these pictures are taken from, but they are not taken from this one. You would think even a simple photo of William Bendix would have worked. I actually like William Bendix in this too, which is unusual for me, but anyway, you know, if you're looking for something different this year, you have a forgotten mystery, you could certainly do a lot worse than Cover Up. Silent Christmas films are indeed a thing. Last year we talked about A Christmas Past, a really fun collection of very old silent films that are Christmas or at least winter themed, that kind of thing, of varying length and varying quality, but a solid set if you like to see things from kind of the infancy of cinema, and if you want something different to watch at Christmas time than the usual stuff. It's a pretty cool set. But there are other, of course, Christmas-related silent films, and one that fits somewhat neatly into the noir or crime thriller genre would be a little movie called The Unholy Three, or should I say, Little Movies, because it turns out there was a silent version from 1925 and a sound remake from 1930, and both of them starred the man himself, one of my favorite silent film actors. If you've watched some of my Halloween videos, you know exactly who I'm talking about. The Phantom of the Opera, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Lon Chaney. You know, Lon Chaney's almost incomparable. A man who was so versatile he could do almost anything. And he starred in both versions of The Unholy Three. The book had been very successful, so it makes sense it was optioned for a movie relatively quickly. And Lon Chaney's absolutely the guy to star in it. So Lon Chaney plays Professor Echo, the great ventriloquist, who, along with his friend Hercules the Strongman and Tweedledee the Midget, decide to leave the sideshow after causing a bit of a debacle there and become jewel thieves with an outlandish plot that no one would ever catch on to, involving them selling non-talking birds as talking birds, with Chaney providing the voices for the bird using his ventriloquist talents. And then, of course, when customers call to complain that the birds aren't speaking, they can secretly case their homes to break into later and rob them, that kind of thing. A very wacky plot. They have, of course, an innocent employee at their bird store, a young man that they're going to frame for crimes just in case something goes wrong. And, of course, Echo's very possessive of his girlfriend Rosie, who works kind of as a pickpocket at the sideshow, that sort of thing. So a very wacky, kind of offbeat plot. But I gotta say, Lon Chaney sells it. He makes it work, that kind of thing. And he's fully believable as this sort of carnival attraction ventriloquist man making his dummies say all these lewd things. Now, Chaney starred in both the 1925 silent and 1930 sound versions of this movie, so he gets to play the part twice. Most people like the silent version better because it is a little more artistic, with Todd Browning directing. We've talked about Todd Browning before, especially his work with Lon Chaney. But I have to say, I think the sound version works because the story kind of needs sound. Chaney often gets criticized for doing his own ventriloquism because he wasn't a professional, but I think he's actually pretty good. He does all the voices himself, that sort of thing. So it's not like it's dubbed in badly or anything like that. The silent movie gets kind of creative with the title cards, like when the birds speak, because they're not really talking, these little speech bubble cards appear like over the birds, that kind of thing. It's really interesting. There's a couple scenes where, you know, they use sound effects, things like that, to kind of try to establish that he's speaking and everybody's sort of reacting to it. It's kind of bizarre, really. But the sound version's able to do that better because it can just have them speak. Now, of course, the sound quality is not amazing, as this was 1930, and this was sort of the first time Lon Chaney had talked on camera. Indeed, it would be his only sound film before his death, not long after. But I gotta say, I like that. I like that he does his ventriloquism. I think he's quite convincing. And of course, backing him up, we have Harry Earls from Freaks as the midget character, who has a bad attitude. Indeed, he gets some of the best scenes too, as you can tell that even though he has to masquerade as a small child, he's heartless and cruel, that kind of thing. The scene where he mocks the man they murdered while trying to rob his house, and about him begging for his life and pleading, definitely establishes what type of character he is. And interestingly, future Oscar winner Victor McLaglen plays Hercules the Strongman in the original film. He's replaced by Ivan Linlow. He popped up in a few other things in the early 30s for the remake, but I like Victor McLaglen better. So it is kind of an offbeat, quirky crime film, not too dissimilar from We're No Angels. And of course, as it involves a Christmas Eve heist and some various crime around that time of the year, I think it fits in appropriately as a seasonal thing. But there are a couple horror-ish elements. You know, Lon Chaney movies are often widely branded as horror, even if some of them aren't. And this one really isn't. But there are a couple things. Notably, we have a killer gorilla. In the Sound movie, it's played by a guy in a gorilla suit. Convincingly, I guess you would say, or I should say unsurprisingly. Maybe not convincingly, but definitely the usual trend for that time. But in the silent film, they have a chimpanzee, and they shrunk down the sets to about 2/3 size, and this chimpanzee just kind of rampages around them. It's very odd to see a very angry, probably badly treated chimp going nuts and smashing up these miniature sets. It's different, I don't know, just one of those weird Todd Browning touches, I guess. I also think the ending to the Sound version is better. It's a little more believable, a little more downbeat. The silent version, definitely worth checking out, was a huge hit for 1925. I go with the Sound one, but they're both Christmassy, they're both a lot of fun, and it never hurts to get an extra dose of the master himself, Lon Chaney. If you're off on the road this holiday season, just make sure that you are traveling safely and keeping an eye on the weather. You don't want to get snowed in on the road to Utopia. So the road movies are a lot of fun. Bob Hope and Bing Crosby teamed up in various globe-trotting adventures with lots of wacky hijinks in them, and both enjoyed Christmas movies apart from one another that we could talk about. You know, we mentioned things like White Christmas and Holiday Inn for Bing Crosby, but when it comes to Bob Hope, his big contribution to Christmas cinema comes in 1951's The Lemon Drop Kid, a great starring vehicle for Bob Hope. Probably not my favorite of his solo starring vehicles, but definitely up there pretty high. As the Lemon Drop Kid, Bob Hope is a racetrack tout, selling people tips on horses, usually ones that aren't any good, and of course collecting a percentage of the winnings. Then he gets some very funny scenes, such as pretending to be a doctor, who will then come to collect a donation for his clinic, should his horse come in, that kind of thing. But anyway, he accidentally rips off the girlfriend of a big shot gangster played by Fred Clark, and since Fred Clark has lost a ton of money on this race, it makes sense that he now will take the money out of Bob Hope's hide, giving him until Christmas to pay up, which leads to wacky, you know, classic romantic comedy shenanigans of Hope constantly conning people, including his girlfriend, another gangster, Oxford Charlie, here played by Lady in the Lake's Lloyd Nolan. We talked about his performance in Lady in the Lake, the absolute highlight of that movie in last week's video. But here he gets to play it a little more for laughs. He is still threatening though, but Hope tries to rip him off and also tries to help, both realistically and also in his own sort of facetious way, help Jane Darwell and several other little old ladies find a home for Christmas, that kind of thing. And of course all this wacky stuff that could never happen in real life results in the day being saved and a very happy ending. One of the main reasons why the Lemon Drop Kid is remembered today is for the introduction of the classic Christmas song, Silver Bells. Here though it's kind of odd because Silver Bells is played almost for laughs. William Frawley, yes, Fred Mertz from I Love Lucy, who pops up as one of the New York hoodlums who's a good friend to Bob Hope's Lemon Drop Kid, sings his own version with altered lyrics, and there's some little gags and bits like that, a little bit of ethnic humor that hasn't aged particularly well thrown in there too, and I don't know, it was kind of odd. I was expecting more, I think, from that performance than what I actually got. But I gotta say, it's well cast, and a lot of the gags land. Hope, of course, goes in drag as a little old lady, leads to some great gags there. A lot of the effects shots are really bad. Some of them I'm sure that was intentional to kind of be in on the comedy, but there's an elaborate scene where they turn Fred Clark's casino into a home for little old ladies to rest in, so they're sleeping on pool tables and roulette tables and stuff. But there's a switch in the wall that will hide all of this furniture in case there's a raid, and you turn the switch again to come back out. And this leads to an extended scene with some really bad, you know, camera tricks, like playing the film backwards and speeding it up and stuff, and it goes on way too long, not convincing at all, easily my least favorite part of the film, as well as some very base humor regarding a cow. But at the end of the day, if you like Bob Hope, and you want to see him get some good one-liners and some zany physical comedy, Lemon Drop Kid's definitely the way to go. Got a fun supporting cast, based on the work of author Damon Runyan, of course. Today we think of things like Guys and Dolls, you know, people speaking with a lot of old-timey slang, but also not using contractions, things like that to kind of give it its own flavor. And although they do use contractions here, they use a lot of those terms, such as Guys and Dolls, to help kind of tell the story. It's fun, it's innocuous, it's really silly, but if you like Bob Hope, I think you'll have a good time with The Lemon Drop Kid.